How do you turn a setback into a strategic advantage, or build unstoppable momentum from the smallest step? Your mind is your most powerful asset, but only if you control it. In this first section, we explore the 50 essential tools for self-mastery. These are the proven mental models and psychological hacks to help you reprogram your mind, master your focus, and build a system for success. This is your guide to peak performance. 1. The Alchemy of Perception. Turning setbacks into strategic advantages. Reframing problems as opportunities is one of the most transformative, yet widely misunderstood, mental shifts you can make. At its core, this technique, often called cognitive reframing in psychology, is about taking what appears to be a setback, an obstacle, or a devastating loss, and consciously choosing to view it as a hidden doorway to growth, learning, or advantage. This is not blind optimism or the toxic positivity of pretending everything is fine. It is the cold, strategic act of altering your perception so that what once felt like an impenetrable wall now looks like a stepping stone. Our brains are wired for survival, a relic of our evolutionary past. When faced with a problem, our instinct, driven by the amygdala, is to focus on danger, loss, and pain. This triggers a stress response, narrows our thinking, and often leads to fear-based inaction. We become trapped in a state of reaction, focused only on the wound. When you consciously reframe that problem as an opportunity, you are performing a mental override. You are hijacking this primal fear response and engaging the creative, resourceful prefrontal cortex, the part of your mind that solves complex problems. The mechanism for this hijack is often a simple but profound change in language. The disempowered mind asks, "Why is this happening to me?" This question is a dead end. It implies victimhood and seeks only to assign blame. The strategic mind asks, "What can I gain from this? Or what does this new reality now make possible?" That single shift changes your entire emotional state, and your emotional state dictates your actions. Imagine you are fired from your job. The default, problem-focused mind spirals into fear, shame, and self-doubt. It sees only loss. The reframed, opportunity-focused mind sees it differently. This is a force opening. This is the universe forcibly removing the golden handcuffs that kept you in a job you tolerated but didn't love. It is the sudden, stark opening you needed. A chance to finally start the business you've been dreaming of, to pivot to a career that truly excites you, or to escape a toxic environment that was quietly killing your ambition. Consider another example. A product launch fails catastrophically. The problem-focused mind sees only wasted money and humiliation. The opportunity-focused mind sees that it just purchased $100,000 worth of invaluable real-world market data on what its customers don't want. This failure is the very data needed to pivot and create a billion-dollar success. Those who master reframing find power in places others see only despair. They understand that rejection is just redirection. They see failure as fuel. Every problem becomes a disguised invitation, and the world begins to feel less like a battlefield and more like a treasure map. 2. The Neuroscience of Inevitability. Programming your mind for victory. Visualizing success in vivid detail is not the passive, whimsical daydreaming it is often mistaken for. It is an active, focused, and systematic form of mental rehearsal. When executed correctly, this technique is a powerful tool for programming your mind and body to perform as if the outcome you desire is not just possible, but inevitable. This is not mysticism. It is practical neuroscience. The core of this technique involves creating a crystal-clear, sensory-rich image of the precise moment you have achieved your goal. The image must be so real, so immersive, that your brain, which struggles to differentiate between a vividly imagined event and a real one, cannot tell the difference. When done correctly, visualization doesn't just inspire you. It fundamentally changes your physiology, sharpens your focus, and hardwires the neurological belief that success is possible. The human brain is, at its essence, a prediction machine. It is constantly, and mostly unconsciously, shaping your present actions based on the future it expects. When you spend your days mentally rehearsing stress, failure, and obstacles, your mind begins to expect that outcome, and your body starts aligning itself to make that negative future real. This is how self-sabotage is born. But when you mentally rehearse success, you hijack this prediction machine. This is based on Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together, wire together. When you vividly visualize, you are building the same neural pathways you would use in the real event. This creates a feeling of familiarity and inevitability. Olympic athletes have used this for decades. They don't just think about winning. They mentally run their race, step by step, feeling the explosion from the blocks, the rhythm of their breathing, the exact firing of their muscles in perfect sequence. By the time the race begins, they have already won it 100 times in their mind. To make visualization powerful, you must see it as if it's happening now, in the first person. This is where most people fail. They watch themselves on a screen. You must be in the moment. Imagine the colors, the lighting, the specific smell of the room. Feel the weight of the handshake. Hear the exact sound of your name being called. Most importantly, you must feel the emotions. Feel the surge of pride, the wave of relief, the deep, pulsing gratitude, until those emotions feel like they already belong to you. This emotional charge is the key. It is what tricks the brain into believing the vision is real. When you have lived your victory 100 times in your mind, the real moment simply feels familiar. Confidence replaces fear. You stop chasing success like a stranger. You start stepping into it like an old friend. 3. The momentum catalyst. Defeating paralysis with the simplest next step. Asking, what's the simplest next step? Is a mental reset button. It is a tool of profound power. A blade that slices through the dense fog of overwhelm and paralysis like nothing else. It is deceptively simple, yet it is profoundly powerful because it pulls you out of the tangled, chaotic mess of everything you could possibly do and forces you to focus on the one, smallest, most achievable action you can take right now. This question is a direct assault on the state of analysis paralysis. That feeling of being so overwhelmed by the sheer scale of a task that you do nothing at all. This paralysis is a biological reaction. The human brain is easily intimidated by complexity. When a task or a goal feels too big, our ancient survival wiring perceives it as a threat. This triggers a cascade of stress, procrastination, doubt, and avoidance. It is a self-defense mechanism. By narrowing your attention to the simplest possible move, you bypass the fear center of your brain, the amygdala, and re-engage the problem-solving prefrontal cortex. You are reactivating your own sense of agency. The beauty of this approach is that simplicity does not mean insignificance. Even the tiniest action, the most microscopic move forward, creates a ripple. It breaks the inertia. It makes the next step easier, and the one after that easier still, until the impossible starts to look inevitable. You are overwhelmed by the idea of writing a 50-page report. The goal is a monster. But you ask, what's the simplest next step? It is not write the introduction. It is open a new document. You do it. What's the next simplest step? Title the document. Done. Done. What's the next simplest step? Write one single bad sentence. That one sentence can lead to finishing a chapter. That one email can lead to landing a client. This question also serves as a powerful antidote to the toxic perfectionism that keeps so many people stuck. Perfectionism is the debilitating belief that you must have the perfect plan before you are allowed to act. This question shatters that illusion. It does not ask for the best step, the perfect step, or the optimal step. It simply asks for the simplest one. You are no longer trying to design the perfect plan. You are simply looking for the smallest thread to pull. And once you pull it, the knot starts to unravel. When life feels overwhelming, your mind often screams for an escape. But when you calmly ask, what's the simplest next step? You silence the noise and turn chaos into clarity. It is not about the grand leap. It is about the smallest move forward, the one that turns stuck energy into unstoppable momentum. 4. The Dopamine Ladder, using micro steps to hack motivation. Breaking tasks into micro steps is the art of psychological dismantling. It is the practical application of taking an overwhelming, intimidating goal and breaking it into a series of bite-sized actions so small they feel almost laughably easy to start. This is not just a productivity trick. It is a psychological lever that fundamentally transforms your emotional relationship with the work, converting dread into momentum. The human brain is wired to love completion. Every time you finish a task, no matter how small, your brain delivers a small, satisfying hit of dopamine, the feel-good chemical that builds a cycle of motivation. When a task feels huge, writing a book, launching a business, reorganizing your entire life, your mind perceives it as an unclimbable mountain. This triggers fear and procrastination before you even take the first step. But when you break that mountain down into a pile of pebbles, the intimidation disappears. This is a strategic planning method. The goal write a chapter becomes write a single sentence. The goal get in shape becomes put on workout clothes. The barrier to entry is so low that you simply cannot justify avoiding it. The magic of this system is in the chain reaction it creates. That one laughably easy step often and almost effortlessly turns into something more. That one sentence you committed to writing turns into a full paragraph because the friction of starting has been eliminated. That 5-minute walk you forced yourself to take turns into a half-hour workout because the getting ready was the only part you were truly dreading. Each micro step builds momentum, and that momentum builds confidence. This approach also provides a powerful defense against the toxic loop of procrastination and guilt. Instead of berating yourself at the end of the day for not writing your book, you get to celebrate a small, concrete win. I wrote my one sentence. This small win, and the dopamine that comes with it, shifts your self-image. You are no longer someone who struggles. You become someone who takes action. Breaking tasks down is not about doing less. It is about building the bridge to doing more by making the start so easy you cannot talk yourself out of it. 5. The activation trigger. How the 5-minute start trick hijacks procrastination. The 5-minute start trick is a psychological hack that directly dismantles procrastination by tricking your brain into beginning a task without the crushing weight of full commitment. It works by targeting the single hardest part of any task, not the work itself, but the wall of mental resistance you feel before you start. This is the activation energy. Your brain, in an effort to conserve energy and avoid discomfort, will fabricate 1,000 excuses and flood you with worst-case scenarios to prevent you from beginning. The 5-minute trick is a simple negotiation with this resistant part of your mind. You tell yourself, I only need to do this for 5 minutes. You give yourself full, honest permission to stop after those 5 minutes are up. This single move removes the pressure, quiets the inner critic, and bypasses the fear of the task's size or complexity. Your brain, which hates the uncertainty of a large, undefined task, readily agrees to this small, well-defined, and non-threatening commitment. The moment you begin, the entire dynamic shifts. Your brain moves from a state of avoidance to a state of engagement. The mental barrier between thinking about the work and actually doing the work dissolves. This is where the trick reveals its true power. Once you have started, momentum takes over. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. You will almost always find that the human mind resists starting far more than it resists continuing. You might tell yourself you'll clean for just 5 minutes, but once you've put away the first few items, the urge to keep going kicks in. You may open a blank document to write just one sentence, and 20 minutes later, you find you are still typing, fully immersed in a state of flow. This method also serves to shatter perfectionism's chokehold. By lowering the commitment to something that is almost too easy to fail, you free yourself from the paralyzing expectation of brilliance or completion. You are not trying to write a perfect chapter. You are simply showing up for 5 minutes. And as any professional will tell you, showing up is where the magic begins. This is not about doing less. It is about opening the door to doing far more than you imagined, simply by beginning before your excuses can catch up. 6. The finish line blueprint, working backward to make success inevitable. Reverse engineering from the end goal is the mental blueprinting process that transforms vague, ethereal dreams into a set of precise, actionable steps. This technique flips the way most people approach goals. The average person stands in the present, surrounded by a fog of uncertainty, and tries to stumble forward blindly toward their goal. This technique, in contrast, starts with crystal clarity. You begin by mentally transporting yourself to the finish line. You imagine, in exact, sensory detail, that your destination is achieved, the metrics are met, and you are feeling the full emotional weight of completion. Then, from that point of victory, you mentally trace the path backward, step by step, until you are standing at the present moment. You are no longer stumbling into a fog. You are working from a finished map toward a known destination. This works because the human brain responds differently to clarity than it does to ambiguity. Ambiguity breeds hesitation and procrastination. A vague goal like get in shape is impossible for the brain to act on. But a vivid, tangible goal, I have successfully run a marathon, creates a powerful magnetic pull. You stop asking the weak question, what should I do? And start asking the critical, strategic question, what had to happen right before this success was possible? This question is the key that unlocks the entire sequence of critical actions. Let's apply it. The goal is I have published a book. You are holding the printed copy. What happened right before that? You approved the final manuscript. Before that, you went through several rounds of editing. Before that, you went through several rounds of editing. You completed the first draft. Before that, you outlined the chapters, all the way back to the very first step, writing the first sentence. That terrifying, abstract mountain has just been reduced to a simple, non-intimidating first step. This technique also brilliantly exposes bottlenecks before you ever hit them. When you work backward, you can see clearly. At step 4, I will need a skill I don't have. Or at step 7, I will need a resource I must acquire. This allows you to prepare in advance rather than scramble under pressure. It turns overwhelm into structure and uncertainty into a feeling of inevitability. People who master this operate like chess players, making moves with the endgame already secured in their mind. They are not guessing at the path. They are simply retracing it. 7. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your questions. Asking better questions is a mental skill, a discipline that can fundamentally change the entire trajectory of your decisions, relationships, and opportunities. The quality of your life is directly and inextricably tied to the quality of the questions you ask, both of others and of yourself. This is because questions are the compass that guides your thinking. Your brain is, at its core, a problem-solving machine. But it is a machine that waits for instructions. The questions you feed it are those instructions. If you ask shallow, vague, or reactive questions, your brain is cognitively obligated to deliver equally shallow, vague, and reactive answers. But when you learn to ask precise, challenging, and empowering questions, you force your mind to search for deeper truths, creative solutions, and new possibilities that were previously invisible. Most people, often unconsciously, ask questions that keep them stuck. These are dead-end questions that lock you into a victim's mindset. Questions like, why is this happening to me? Why am I not good enough? What if I fail? Whose fault is this? These questions are traps. Your brain, as an obedient servant, will dutifully search for and find all the evidence to prove that you are a victim, that you aren't good enough, and that the situation is someone else's fault. You get trapped in a loop of negativity. The shift occurs when you consciously change the inquiry. Instead of why me, you ask, What can I learn from this? Instead of what if I fail? You ask, how can I make this work? Instead of why can't I get ahead? You ask, what is one small, high-leverage action I can take today to move forward? Your brain immediately stops building walls and starts opening doors. This is why high performers, leaders, and innovators obsess over the questions they ask. They know their thinking is shaped by them. A disempowering question is, why did I get passed over for that promotion? The empowering question is, what skills must I develop to make me the undeniable choice for the next promotion? One question leads to resentment. The other leads to an action plan. Better questions pull your attention to solutions instead of problems, possibilities instead of limitations. They spark curiosity and force you to think bigger than your fears. Change your questions, and you don't just change your answers. You change what is possible for your entire life. 8. The Strategic Rehearsal. How to win difficult conversations before they start. Rehearsing difficult conversations mentally is the secret weapon for walking into high-stakes moments with clarity, control, and confidence. This is not about anxiety. It is about preparation. At its core, it is the practice of running the entire interaction through your mind before it ever happens. This is not just a vague thinking about it. It is a full-scale simulation. You must imagine the words you will say, the precise, calm tone you will use, and the grounded, confident emotional energy you will project. This mental preparation is a form of stress inoculation. It transforms raw fear into focused readiness. Difficult conversations, like asking for a raise, giving critical feedback, or ending a relationship, trigger the body's primitive stress response. Your heart races, your voice tightens, your palms sweat, and your brain floods with adrenaline, making it almost impossible to think clearly. By rehearsing in advance, you are conditioning your mind and nervous system to respond with intention instead of panic. You are, quite literally, teaching yourself to stay composed when it matters most. The most critical part of this process, and the part most people skip, is not just practicing your words, it is anticipating theirs. You must imagine every possible reaction from the other person: anger, defensiveness, sadness, deflection, or even total silence. Then, you mentally prepare your calm, measured, and strategic response for each of those branches. This way, you are never blindsided. For example, you are asking for a raise. You rehearse your data-driven points. You anticipate the no based on budget cuts. You then rehearse your pivot. I understand the budget constraints, which is why I've also outlined a plan to take on a new responsibility that will generate X amount of new revenue, more than covering this increase. You also picture your body language: steady eye contact, open posture, calm breathing. How you carry yourself often speaks louder than what you say. Athletes and negotiators use this to stay cool under pressure. When you finally step into that real conversation, you radiate a calm, grounded presence. You don't fumble. You speak with purpose. You don't react. You respond strategically. You are unshakable, because in your mind, you have already been there before. 9. The Stoic Secret. Disarming fear by rehearsing disaster. Negative visualization is a profoundly counterintuitive mental technique that strips fear of its power by forcing you to face it head-on. Instead of desperately avoiding thoughts of failure, rejection, or loss, you deliberately and systematically imagine the worst-case scenario in vivid detail. This practice, rooted in ancient Stoic philosophy, where it was known as premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, is not designed to scare you. It is designed to disarm your fear. It trains your mind to accept that even if the worst happens, you will survive, you will adapt, and you will move forward. Fear thrives in the unknown. When you leave your fears undefined, they are just vague, dark shapes in the corner of your mind. Your brain, in an effort to protect you, fills in the void with exaggerated, catastrophic possibilities that feel utterly paralyzing. When you use negative visualization, you drag those fears out of the shadows and into the bright light of examination. You look at them, piece by piece. You imagine losing the deal. You imagine being rejected. You imagine failing publicly. Then you execute the most critical part of the exercise. You walk through what you would actually do, step by step, if it happened. You are terrified of losing your job, so you visualize it. You get the email. You're in the meeting. You're walking out with your box. You feel the knot in your stomach. Then what? You drive home. You'd be angry. You tell your partner. That night, you would update your resume. The next day, you would email 5 contacts. The day after, you would apply for 10 jobs. Suddenly, the unstoppable monster of fear transforms into a manageable inconvenience. This mental rehearsal has a powerful double benefit. First, it prepares you for adversity. Second, it deepens your gratitude for what you have now. When you vividly visualize losing what you take for granted, your job, your health, your relationships, it sharpens your appreciation. The real power lies in the shift from, "I can't let this happen," to, "Even if this happens, I will be okay." Once your mind accepts that, you stop living in dread. You act with greater boldness because the fear of loss no longer dictates your moves. 10. The habit stacking protocol. Wiring new behaviors to old triggers. This technique is the ultimate psychological shortcut for making behavioral change feel effortless rather than exhausting. At its core, the strategy is about attaching a new, desired behavior to an established, automatic habit. This existing action becomes the non-negotiable trigger for the new one. The human brain is a pattern-making machine. It thrives on sequences and routines. When it successfully links 2 behaviors together, it stops treating the new habit as something foreign and mentally costly. Instead, it begins to merge the 2 actions, treating them as a single unified routine. This is a crucial insight because it directly addresses the number 1 reason most new habits fail: friction. Most people fail to build new habits not because they lack willpower, but because they have too much friction. Starting something new from scratch every single day is mentally costly. It requires you to remember to do the task, decide when to do it, and then motivate yourself to actually begin. This is a battle of activation energy that you must fight every day. Eventually, on a day when you are tired, stressed, or busy, your willpower will fail, and the habit is broken. Habit stacking brilliantly bypasses this entire battle. It hijacks the momentum of a behavior that is already deeply burned into your neural wiring. The formula is a simple statement of intent. After I perform my current habit, I will perform my new habit. The key is that the current habit must be something you already do automatically, without fail. For example, instead of a vague goal like "I will meditate more," the plan becomes, "After I brush my teeth every morning, I will immediately sit on my meditation cushion for 2 minutes." The toothbrush, an action you perform without thought, becomes the stable, reliable cue for meditation. Here are other practical examples. While my morning coffee is brewing, I will write 3 sentences in my gratitude journal. The sound of the coffee pot becomes the trigger. After I take off my work shoes, I will immediately change into my gym clothes. The act of coming home is hijacked to make the first step of working out automatic. After I sit down at the dinner table, I will put my phone on silent and in my pocket. The cue is sitting down. The action is creating presence. The power of this method is its simplicity. You are no longer relying on motivation, which is a fickle and unreliable emotion. You are leveraging a pre-built, automatic system. Before long, the new habit feels less like a choice and more like the natural, unfolding order of your day, rewiring your identity without the struggle. 11. The urgency principle. Weaponizing time and deadlines for peak performance. Applying Parkinson's law is about turning time from your enemy into your most potent strategic ally. The law, first articulated by historian C. Northcote Parkinson in a 1955 satirical essay, states that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. He observed this in the swelling bureaucracy of the British civil service, where administrative tasks seemed to require more and more time as more people were hired to do them, regardless of the actual work output. This is not just a witty observation. It is a fundamental, and often brutal, truth of human psychology. If you give yourself an entire week to complete a task that truly requires only 2 hours, your brain will somehow stretch that task into 7 days. The task's perceived difficulty and complexity will expand, justifying the time you've allotted. This expansion manifests as procrastination, overthinking, and a dive into unnecessary tangential complexities. But when you deliberately and artificially shrink the time available, you force a radical and immediate shift in your brain. You trigger urgency. And urgency is a powerful mental tool that silences the mental noise of perfectionism, eliminates the fluff, and unleashes a level of focused productivity that often surprises you. This works because a tight deadline acts as an aggressive filter. When the clock is ticking fast, you no longer have the luxury of obsessing over perfection. You are forced to stop planning and start executing. Your brain must make an immediate, ruthless calculation. What are the 20% of actions that will get me 80% of the result? You stop wandering into research rabbit holes or chasing distracting side ideas. Your mind locks onto the critical path. Suddenly, that client proposal you've been working on for days is finished in a single focused 60-minute block. We have all experienced this. The student who had an entire semester to write a paper, yet writes a B+ essay in an 8-hour, caffeine-fueled panic is a perfect example. They had 8 weeks, but the real work was done in 8 hours because the deadline forced them to bypass their inner critic. This is the beauty of Parkinson's law. You can and must weaponize it. Give yourself absurdly short, even game-like, deadlines for tasks that don't need endless polishing. Write that important email in 5 minutes, not 30. Finish that report before lunch, not by the end of the day. This time-based constraint forces clarity. You must decide what is essential and cut everything else. High achievers thrive on this, setting aggressive timelines, not to rush quality, but to strip away all wasted effort. 12. The Gratitude Reframe. How a 2-word shift rewires your reality. Reframing I have to into I get to is a subtle but profound linguistic shift that can completely transform your emotional state, turning the lead of obligation into the gold of privilege. At its core, this technique, which is a practical application of cognitive behavioral therapy, rewires how you perceive your responsibilities. It is not about denying that a task is difficult, draining, or undesirable. It is about consciously, strategically changing your relationship to that task. This small change, in words, flips a critical script in your mind. It replaces the cortisol of resistance with the serotonin of gratitude, which in turn fuels your motivation to act. When you say, I have to, your brain hears a command, an external imposition. This language implies you are a prisoner of your circumstances, a victim. It triggers feelings of pressure, resentment, and even quiet rebellion, which makes the task feel even heavier and more draining than it actually is. But the simple phrase I get to reframes the exact same task as a choice, a chance, or a gift. It asserts agency and power. Suddenly, the internal monologue of I have to go to work becomes I get to go to work. And in that simple shift, you are instantly reminded that there are millions of people who are unemployed and would do anything to have a job, an income, and the stability you possess. I have to wake up at 3 a.m. to feed the baby becomes I get to be the one to comfort my child. The exhaustion is still real, but the emotional context has been elevated from burden to purpose. I have to go to the gym. A core becomes I get to move my body, a privilege denied to those who are injured or ill. This is not, as some critics might claim, a form of toxic positivity. It is not about pretending the struggle isn't real. It is a conscious reframing of perspective. The reality of the task doesn't change, but your emotional posture toward it does. You start noticing the value hidden inside the routine, the gratitude buried beneath the grind. The magic of this mental shift is that it doesn't just make you feel better. It changes your energy. People can sense it in your tone, your posture, your presence. When you live in a state of I get to, you move through life less like a prisoner of your duties and more like a willing, empowered participant in your own story. 13. The Dopamine Hack, turning life's grind into a game you can win. Gamifying boring tasks is the art of transforming mundane, soul-draining work into something engaging by turning it into a challenge, a competition, or a reward-based system. It is a conscious hacking of your brain's primal wiring, tapping into its love for play, progress, and achievement. 3 things that even the most disciplined people crave. The brilliance of this hack is that you are not changing the work itself. You are changing how your brain experiences it. The human mind is wired to chase dopamine, the feel-good chemical. But a crucial psychological distinction is that dopamine is released not just from receiving a reward, but from the anticipation of a reward. Boring tasks, folding laundry, cleaning your inbox, writing expense reports are dopamine deserts. They offer no anticipation, only a delayed and minor reward, which is why they feel so exhausting before we even start. By adding simple, game-like elements, you are manufacturing anticipation. You create a sense of urgency and fun that pulls you in instead of pushing you away. This is the exact same psychology that makes fitness apps, language learning tools, and video games so addictive. Duolingo doesn't just ask you to learn vocabulary. It begs you to maintain your 50-day streak and earn gems to level up. Your Apple Watch doesn't just track steps. It creates an urgent game to close your rings and earn badges. You can badges. Build these systems for yourself. Folding laundry becomes a race against the clock. Can I beat my 10-minute high score? Cleaning your desk becomes a quest with experience, points for every item filed or thrown away. Writing that dreaded report turns into earning 10 points per section, with a boss-level reward like a 15-minute walk. After you earn 50 points, the magic lies in creating immediate gratification in situations that normally offer none. When you see progress instantly, checking boxes, watching numbers climb, your brain floods with micro-rewards that keep you engaged. Over time, you start to associate the once boring task with satisfaction instead of dread. You stop asking, "Do I have to?" and start asking, "Can I beat my last score?" Gamification transforms obligation into motivation. 14. The Strategist's Mindset. How to beat the all-or-nothing trap. Thinking in probabilities, not absolutes, is the critical mental shift that frees you from the trap of all-or-nothing thinking and gives you a profound strategic edge in decision-making. Most people, without realizing it, see the world in rigid, binary terms: success or failure, right or wrong, win or lose. This black-and-white mindset feels comforting because it is cognitively easy. It simplifies a complex, messy, and uncertain reality. But it is an illusion, and it is a dangerous one. Life is a spectrum of likelihoods, not certainties. Those who understand and embrace this fact can navigate complexity with a clarity and confidence that is unavailable to the binary thinker. When you think in probabilities, you stop asking the emotional, high-stakes question, "Will this work?" That question invites fear and paralysis because the answer can only be a yes or a no. Instead, you start asking the strategic question, "How likely is this to work? And what factors can I influence to increase those odds?" This single shift reframes your choices from emotional gambles to calculated, dispassionate bets. This is precisely how elite investors, professional poker champions, and top military strategists operate. A professional poker player does not know if they will win the next hand. They simply know that if they make a certain bet in this specific situation 100 times, the probability is that they will come out ahead 70 times. They are not playing the individual hand, they are playing the long-term odds. This mindset also kills the fear of failure. If you think in absolutes, a failure, a failed business, a lost deal, is a personal verdict. It means you are a failure. If you think in probabilities, a failure is simply a data point. It was a 30% probability event that happened, and it provides you with new information to refine your next bet. Instead of obsessing over a perfect certain outcome, you focus on stacking small advantages. You force yourself to put a number on it. I'm 70% confident in this approach. What constitutes the 30% risk? Okay, the risk is that the supplier is late. How can I hedge against that risk to increase my odds? In a world addicted to the illusion of certainty, the person who is comfortable with uncertainty and skilled at estimating the odds moves through chaos like a chess player who can already see 10 moves ahead. 15. The system versus the goal. The architecture of inevitable success, focusing on systems instead of just goals, is the strategic shift that separates fleeting wins from sustained, compounding success. This is a crucial distinction. Goals are destinations. They are the what, telling you where you want to go. A goal is lose 30 pounds or write a book. Systems are the engine. They are the how, representing the habits, processes, and daily actions that will get you there, and, more importantly, keep you there. The truth is, anyone can set a goal. Millions of people declare these exact goals every single year. But without a system, a goal is just a wish with an expiration date. When you are purely goal-obsessed, you live in a constant, self-imposed state of not there yet. You are, by definition, in a state of failure every single day until the one brief moment you finally hit the finish line. This is a terrible and demotivating way to live. Even worse, what happens after you achieve the goal? You ran the marathon, so the goal is gone, and you stop running. You publish the book, so the goal is gone, and you stop writing. The goal is achieved, so the system that got you there collapses. Focusing on a system, however, flips the script entirely. A system is a set of daily, repeatable actions that, when compounded, make the goal an inevitable byproduct. If your goal is to write a book, the system is write 500 words every morning at 7 a.m. If your goal is to get fit, the system is be physically active for 30 minutes every day. Systems anchor you in the present and completely remove decision fatigue. The process is already decided. You just show up and execute. You win the day not by hitting the final goal, but by successfully executing the system. This provides a daily feedback loop of success that keeps you motivated. This approach also fundamentally changes your identity. A goal is something you get. A system is something you do. And what you do repeatedly is who you become. You are no longer a person trying to write a book. You are a writer. A writer is a person who writes every day. Champions don't rely on goals. They live inside systems that produce results automatically. When you build a strong system, you no longer chase the goal. The goal chases you. 16. The done list. Hacking your brain's negativity bias for momentum. Keeping a done list is the powerful antidote to the invisible progress trap. That toxic, sinking feeling that you are working constantly yet getting nowhere. While a standard to-do list is essential for organization, it has a dark psychological side. A to-do list is, by its very nature, a list of all the things you haven't done. It represents a gap, and the human brain is wired by evolution to fixate on gaps. This is a cognitive bias known as the Zeigarnik effect. We remember incomplete or interrupted tasks far more intensely and negatively than the tasks we have completed. This is why, at the end of a long, productive day, You don't remember the 10 important tasks you finished. You obsess over the 2 you didn't. This creates a constant low-level anxiety and a false, demoralizing narrative of inadequacy. A done list directly attacks this bias. It breaks the cycle by giving your brain tangible, visible proof of accomplishment. It flips your perspective from the gap, what's left, to the gain, what you've already conquered. This isn't just for big, impressive tasks. It is for everything. Sent that one awkward email, made the difficult phone call, finished the first draft of slide 3, did 5 minutes of the task I was dreading. Every completed item, no matter how small, becomes another brick laid in the structure of your progress. The magic lies in momentum. Seeing a growing physical list of achievements creates a compounding effect. Progress becomes addictive. You start chasing the small, satisfying dopamine hit of adding one more line to the list, which in turn pushes you to keep moving. On days when your energy is low and you feel unproductive, your done list is your objective, factual evidence against that feeling. It is a record that your emotions cannot argue with. This practice also fundamentally reshapes your identity over time. A to-do list reinforces the identity of I am someone who is behind. A done list builds the identity of I am someone who takes action, who moves forward, and who finishes things. Over time, your done list becomes more than a record. It becomes more than a record. Undeniable evidence that you are far more capable and productive than your negativity bias wants you to believe. 17. Stop rereading. The active recall method for forging knowledge into your brain. Practicing active recall is one of the most potent and most difficult learning techniques known. It forces your brain to retrieve information from your memory rather than passively reviewing it. This is the difference between a high-intensity workout and watching a video of someone else working out. The common methods of studying: rereading notes, highlighting text, summarizing a chapter, are disastrously inefficient. They are passive. They create what psychologists call the illusion of fluency. As you reread the text, the words become familiar, and your brain tragically mistakes this familiarity for true mastery. You feel like you know it, but this feeling is a cognitive lie. The moment you are asked to explain the concept without your notes, you draw a blank. This is because passive review doesn't build strong, new neural connections. It's comfortable, but it's a waste of time. Active recall is the opposite. It is difficult, it feels slow, and it is brutally effective. It is the mental equivalent of weightlifting for your brain. The effort is the entire point. The process is simple. You close the book, hide your notes, and try to write, speak, or think through what you just learned without looking. This effortful retrieval, the struggle itself, is the signal that matters. That struggle sends a powerful message to your brain. This information was hard to get. This must be important. Strengthen this neural connection. Every time you force yourself to recall a fact, you are pulling that knowledge out of storage, re-encoding it, and making it stronger and more accessible in the future. This is why flashcards work, if done correctly. You must try to say the answer out loud before turning the card over. If you just look at the card and think, "Oh yeah, I knew that," you are engaging in passive review. Active recall also immediately exposes the gaps in your understanding. The moments when you think you know something but can't explain it clearly. Those gaps are gold. They tell you exactly where to focus your next round of study. Real durable learning doesn't happen when information goes in. It happens when you have to fight to pull it back out. 18. The Feynman Technique. The fastest way to own what you know. The Teach It method is the fastest way to transform information from something you've merely heard into something you truly own. It is the ultimate test against the illusion of knowing, and the most effective way to cement knowledge. This concept is most famously crystallized in what is known as the Feynman Technique, named after the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman. He was a master not just at discovering complex ideas, but at explaining them in stunningly simple, elegant terms. His rule was a simple one. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. At its core, this method is the deliberate act of explaining what you've just learned to someone else, or even to an empty room or an inanimate object. If you were the teacher, this process is a cognitive forge. It forces your brain to organize, simplify, and clarify the information, turning vague, fuzzy, half-formed understanding into sharp, unshakable knowledge. When you passively read a text, it is easy to hide from what you don't know. But when you try to teach a concept, you can't hide. You quickly, and often painfully, discover the gaps in your understanding. You find the areas where your grasp is weak, the concepts you can't explain without stumbling, or the places where you are forced to resort to complex jargon. This jargon is a red flag. It's often a mask for a lack of true understanding. This awareness of your gaps is priceless, because it pushes you to go back, fill those gaps, and refine your thinking until the material becomes second nature. Students learn passively, but teachers learn actively. The act of teaching engages multiple cognitive processes at once. You must recall the information from memory, translate it into your own words, and structure it into a logical narrative that another mind can absorb. Each step strengthens the neural pathways. This method isn't limited to classrooms. You can teach by writing a blog post about what you learned. You can explain a concept to a friend or colleague. Programmers call it rubber duck debugging, explaining their code, line by line, to a rubber duck on their desk. The act of verbalizing forces a precision that passive thought does not. Those who master this method don't just know the facts, they can explain, persuade, and apply them. 19. The myth of readiness. Why clarity comes from action, not before it. Writing before your thinking feels ready is a creative power move that bypasses the perfectionist gatekeeper in your mind. This gatekeeper is that internal critic, that voice of doubt that suffocates ideas before they can even take their first breath. Most people wait. They wait until they believe they have the perfect sentence, the flawless plan, or the complete, fully formed thought before they will allow themselves to put pen to paper. But this delay is fatal. It kills momentum, and in most cases, the idea itself. The truth that professionals in every creative field know, and that amateurs constantly resist, is that clarity rarely comes before action. Clarity comes from action. The act of writing, of doing, is not the final step of thinking. It is the first step in the process of thinking. When you start writing before you feel ready, you give your brain permission to explore, to be messy, to be wrong, all without the paralyzing pressure of being brilliant. This technique works by fundamentally reframing your relationship with the blank page. The blank page is intimidating only when you treat it as a stage for a finished performance. This view is paralyzing, as the perfectionist gatekeeper screams that you are not ready for the audience. You must learn to treat the page as a workbench instead. A workbench is a private, messy, chaotic place for half-formed drafts, bad ideas, and terrible sentences. No one is invited to the workbench. The performance comes much, much later. In that safety, ideas pour out. Some of the most brilliant breakthroughs come from words you didn't plan to write, from thoughts you didn't even know you had until you saw them appear in front of you. That is because the brain thrives on iteration. You write something down, you react to it, and that reaction sparks the next line, and the next. This is the shitty first draft principle, as author Anne Lamott calls it. You cannot edit a blank page. You must first produce the raw material, no matter how imperfect. If you wait until you feel ready, you will spend more time preparing to think than actually thinking. Readiness isn't a prerequisite. It's the result of showing up and beginning the work. 20. The leverage principle. Stop being busy. Start being effective. Focusing on high-leverage activities is the core discipline of channeling your finite time, energy, and attention into the small set of actions that create disproportionately large results. It is the ruthless, strategic rejection of busyness in favor of effectiveness. The concept comes from physics. Archimedes famously said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world." In your life, your time and energy are the force you apply. A high-leverage activity is the long lever that multiplies your force, allowing you to achieve exponential results with the same amount of effort. Most people fall into the trap of activity overproductivity, mistaking motion for progress. They fill their days with easy, comfortable, low-leverage tasks, answering emails as they arrive, attending meetings they don't need to be in, checking boxes on trivial to-do items. These tasks make them feel busy and productive, but they deliver little real change. High-leverage activities are the opposite. They are often uncomfortable, require deep, uninterrupted focus, and may involve risk, but their payoff is exponential. The challenge is purely psychological. Your brain craves the instant, easy gratification of checking off low-leverage tasks. You get a small, quick dopamine hit. High-leverage activities, by contrast, almost always have a delayed reward. They are harder, and the payoff is further away. This is where discipline is truly defined. The ability to ignore the easy, small reward now in favor of the massive, game-changing reward later. Here is the difference. Answering 50 individual customer service emails is low leverage. Taking one afternoon to write a clear, in-depth fact page or record a tutorial video that prevents those 50 emails from ever being sent again is high leverage. Manually compiling a report every Friday is low leverage. Taking one full day to build an automated dashboard that builds the report for you forever is high leverage. One well-placed, difficult conversation can open doors that months of grinding never could. You must train yourself to measure your day not by the number of things you do, but by the impact of the things you do. 21. The 80-20 Mandate. How to achieve more by ruthlessly culling the trivial. The 80-20 principle, also known as the Pareto principle, is a concept that is often misunderstood as a simple business metric. In reality, it is a fundamental law of imbalance that governs nearly all aspects of life. It posits that the vast majority of your results, roughly 80%, come from a tiny fraction of your efforts, roughly 20%. This isn't just a business aphorism. It's a profound psychological and strategic tool. 20% of your clients will likely generate 80% of your revenue. 20% of your habits will be responsible for 80% of your health outcomes. 20% of your social circle will provide 80% of your emotional support. The key is not just to know this rule, but to apply it ruthlessly. This means having the discipline to identify, prioritize, and double down on that vital 20%, while just as importantly, having the courage to cut, ignore, or delegate the other 80%, the trivial many, without feeling guilty. This is precisely where most people fail. They are not afraid of the work. They are afraid of the focus. They fall into the trap of productivity theater, where they feel busy all day by answering dozens of emails, attending endless meetings, and checking off trivial items from a to-do list. This busyness feels productive, but it is often just motion, not progress. The real, high-impact work found in the vital 20% is often uncomfortable, ambiguous, and carries a risk of failure. It's psychologically easier to clean your inbox, an 80% task, than to make that one difficult sales call, a 20% task. That could land your biggest client. Applying this ruthlessly means performing a brutal audit of your life. Ask yourself, which 20% of my tasks are creating 80% of my results? Which 20% of my relationships are creating 80% of my happiness? And critically, which 20% of my activities are causing 80% of my stress? The emotional challenge is real. Letting go of tasks feels risky. It means disappointing people. It means abandoning projects you've already started. But in reality, you are clearing the noise so your best, most leveraged work can finally dominate. 22. The Decision Log. How to stop repeating mistakes and master your judgment. Keeping a decision journal is a mental discipline that transforms the messy, emotional art of decision-making from a guessing game into a science. At its heart, It is the practice of recording your key decisions, not after the fact, but in the moment you make them. You must log your reasoning, your expectations, and most critically, your emotional state at the time. Then, months or even years later, you revisit that entry to see exactly where you were right, where you were wrong, and where you were blinded by bias. Most people move through life believing their successes came from skill and their failures from bad luck, without ever dissecting the truth. We are all victims of hindsight bias, the cognitive illusion that makes past events seem predictable and obvious once the outcome is known. This bias is the single greatest enemy of learning from experience. It makes us believe I knew it all along, when in fact, we didn't. A decision journal shatters that illusion. When you log your choices in real time, you capture the fragile details your memory will later distort. You create an honest record of what you actually knew and how you actually felt. A proper entry includes the situation, 1-2 sentences of context, the decision, the clear choice you are making, the reasoning data, what information you had, what assumptions you made, the emotional state, this is critical. Were you fearful, greedy, impatient, overly optimistic, and the expected outcome? What do you expect to happen, and by when? Months later, the outcome is clear. You review. The stock you bought collapsed. Without a journal, you'd say, I knew it was risky. But your journal says, I was optimistic and driven by FOMO. The lesson is not I'm bad at investing. The lesson is I make poor decisions when I feel FOMO. The true power of this habit lies in the patterns it reveals over time. You stop repeating the same expensive mistakes and start stacking better choices. This self-audit is brutally honest, but it is the fastest path to refining your judgment. You are no longer guided by a faulty memory or a fragile ego, but by an evolving, factual record of your own thinking. 23. The CEO of you. Why you must schedule time to simply think. Scheduling thinking time is the deliberate, non-negotiable act of stepping away from the noise of doing, so you can focus on the deeper, more strategic work of deciding. In a world that glorifies constant action, relentless hustle, and a perpetually full calendar, most people never stop to think about whether they are even running in the right direction. They just run faster. But this scheduled thinking time is where the real breakthroughs happen. It is where stubborn problems unravel, where disparate ideas connect, and where the scattered pieces of your life or business finally fit together. When you schedule this time, you are making a powerful declaration. Clarity is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Your mind, like your phone, cannot function at its highest level without dedicated time to recharge and process. This isn't passive daydreaming. During this protected block of time, you are not multitasking, scrolling, or reacting. You are sitting with a single question, a challenge, or a vision, and giving it your full, undivided mental energy. This works because the human brain is an incredible connection machine, but it can only connect the dots when it has breathing room. In the rush of daily life, urgent tasks, like emails and notifications, scream for your attention, while important ideas, like your 5-year strategy, can only whisper. Thinking time is how you turn up the volume on those whispers. It's in these quiet, uninterrupted moments that you will see the hidden solutions and spot the opportunities that others miss. Leaders and top performers, like Bill Gates with his famous Think Weeks, fiercely protect this time because they know it multiplies the value of every action hour that follows. You must schedule it like a doctor's appointment and be ruthless in protecting it. This is your CEO time. What do you do in this time? You review your decision journal. You ask good questions. What is the 80-20 in my life right now? What is the one bottleneck that, if removed, would unlock the most progress? Is the ladder I'm climbing against the right wall? Action without thought is just motion without progress. A single hour of focused thinking can save you weeks of wasted effort. 24. If-then planning. The mental autopilot for hacking your willpower. Using if-then planning is like installing mental autopilot for your goals. It is a simple but powerful technique for pre-deciding your actions before life can throw distractions, emotions, or excuses in your way. At its core, this technique, known in psychology as an implementation intention, links a specific situation, the if, to a predetermined action, the then. Its power lies in its ability to completely remove the hesitation gap. That gap is the critical moment when your brain debates whether or not to act. It is in that gap that willpower fails and excuses are born. I should go to the gym, but I'll just check my email first. And the moment is lost. An if-then plan eliminates that gap because you have already made the choice in advance. Your brain, which loves patterns, simply follows the script. Most people's intentions are vague, which is why they fail. A goal like, "I'll try to work out more," is useless because it gives your brain no clear instructions. An if-then plan is precise. If it's 7:00 a.m. on weekdays, then I put on my running shoes and start. The trigger is specific, and the action is predetermined. This method is especially powerful for handling moments of high pressure, temptation, or stress. In those moments, your rational brain, the prefrontal cortex, goes offline and your emotional impulsive brain takes over. This is why you know you shouldn't eat the cake, but you do it anyway. You can't rely on in-the-moment willpower. You must rely on a ready-made response that you created when you were calm and rational. If the waiter offers me the dessert menu, then I will immediately order a black coffee. Research by psychologist Peter Gollwitzer, who coined the term, has shown that people who use if-then planning are 200% to 300% more likely to stick to their goals. This is not because they are more motivated, but because they've built an automatic chain reaction between cue and action. It turns discipline from a battle of will into a reflex. It's not magic. It's preparation disguised as inevitability. 25. The compounding effect. How to build exponential growth with habit stacking. Stacking habits for exponential growth is the strategy of linking a new desired behavior to one you already do automatically, creating a chain of actions that compounds over time. This technique, also called habit anchoring, works because your brain runs on cues. Every habit you have, good or bad, starts with a trigger. This method strategically hijacks the trigger of an existing, automatic habit. It brilliantly bypasses the friction of remembering, deciding, or forcing willpower. Instead of trying to build a new habit from scratch, which requires immense activation energy, you simply ride the momentum of something you're already doing. The beauty lies in how small this can start. The formula, as popularized by James Clear, is simple. After I perform my current habit, I will perform my new habit. The key is that the current habit must be something you already do without fail. For example, instead of a vague goal like I will meditate more, the plan becomes, after I brush my teeth every morning, I will meditate for 2 minutes. The toothbrush, an action you perform without thought, becomes the stable cue for meditation. This method works because you're not relying on motivation, which is unreliable. You are hitching a ride on a behavior that is already burned into your neural wiring. The brain fuses them into one seamless ritual. The toothbrush means meditate. The coffee pot means write. Other examples are plentiful. While my morning coffee is brewing, I will write 3 sentences in a journal. After I take off my work shoes, I will immediately change into my gym clothes. After I sit down for dinner, I will say one thing I'm grateful for. The exponential growth part is key. Habits compound like interest. That 2-minute meditation feels easy, so soon it becomes 5 minutes. Those 3 sentences in your journal turn into a full page. That 1 push-up after brushing your teeth becomes 10. You are building a system that expands naturally without extra effort. Most people fail at building habits because they rely on motivation. Habit stacking eliminates that weakness by piggybacking on what you're already doing. 26. The creative pressure cooker. Using deadlines to force innovation. Using deadlines as creative constraints is the art of turning time pressure from a source of stress into a weapon for focus, productivity, and innovation. Most people see deadlines as stress-inducing ultimatums. But when used intentionally, they become powerful psychological triggers. They silence overthinking, force decisive action, and spark unexpected creativity. At its core, this method relies on a fundamental truth about human behavior. Often cited as Parkinson's law, work expands to fill the time you give it. Without a boundary to push against, the mind wanders. Perfectionism, which is often just fear in disguise, creeps in. Tasks expand endlessly as you chase distractions, draining momentum until you feel trapped in a state of almost done forever. A well-set, challenging deadline snaps you out of that haze. It creates urgency, which sharpens attention and cuts away the luxury of hesitation. You stop entertaining 100 possible approaches and are forced to commit to one path because the clock is ticking. Paradoxically, this limitation can also free your creativity. When time is unlimited, the brain clings to safe, obvious ideas, endlessly refining them. But when time is scarce, you are forced to bypass your inner critic and tap into raw, instinctive problem solving. You have to find the clever shortcut, the elegant workaround, the 80-20 solution. Many of history's most brilliant works, from last-minute speeches to groundbreaking designs, were born in the pressure cooker of a looming cutoff. The key is to make the deadline challenging but realistic. Too short, and you panic into sloppy work. Too long, and you slip back into procrastination. The sweet spot is the deadline that forces focus without sacrificing quality. This is the principle behind the Pomodoro technique. Giving yourself just 25 minutes forces you to produce, not just plan. When you learn to wield deadlines not as threats but as creative boundaries, you stop fearing the clock and start using it as a catalyst. Every tick becomes fuel. 27. The Autopilot Trap: How to Break Patterns and Spark New Ideas. Breaking patterns to spark new ideas is the intentional act of disrupting your usual ways of thinking, behaving, or working so your brain can escape its comfort loops. The human mind is, by default, wired for efficiency, not creativity. It loves routines, habits, and predictable sequences because they conserve mental energy. This autopilot mode is great for survival. It's what allows you to drive to work without thinking about every turn. But this same efficiency is terrible for creativity. Doing things the same way every time trains your brain to produce the same results. You are, in effect, carving a mental rut, a neural pathway so deep that your thoughts can't help but fall into it. New ideas require new neural connections, and those connections only form when you interrupt the autopilot. When you deliberately break a pattern, you jolt your brain out of its default mode and force it to process information differently. This disruption doesn't have to be massive. It can be as simple as working in a new environment, like a park or coffee shop. It can be taking a different route to work, forcing your brain to stop sleepwalking and actively process new visual stimuli. You can flip your daily schedule or brainstorm with people outside your usual circle. An engineer will get a breakthrough idea from talking to an artist. A marketer will find a new strategy by talking to an accountant. This cross-pollination is a pattern break. This works because novelty lights up the brain's reward system and activates creative problem-solving regions that stay dormant during routine. This is why you often get your best ideas while traveling or in the shower. You've broken your familiar rhythm. The most innovative thinkers engineer these breaks on purpose. They know that comfort breeds repetition, and repetition breeds stale thinking. They invite the unexpected, knowing that is where ideas suddenly come alive. 28. Opposite thinking: the counterintuitive hack for unlocking innovation. Practicing opposite thinking is the mental jolt that breaks you free from stale patterns and predictable results. At its core, this technique, also known as inversion, means you deliberately flip your default assumptions on their head and ask, what if I did the exact opposite of what I would normally do? It is a powerful method to shatter mental ruts, uncover hidden options, and discover solutions you never knew existed. We are creatures of habit. We fall into repetitive cycles of thought and action because they feel safe, familiar, and efficient. But the very same thinking that got you to your current level of success is often the same thinking that keeps you stuck. Opposite thinking intentionally disrupts that loop. It forces your brain into unfamiliar territory where creativity and insight thrive. For example, if your default instinct is to play it safe in a business deal, this technique forces you to ask, what if I took the boldest risk instead? If your default is to avoid conflict, you ask, what if I addressed it directly? And now, this method works because it exposes blind spots. We rarely question the assumptions driving our decisions. Flipping them upside down forces us to see from angles we normally ignore. Sometimes the opposite path won't be the right one, but the mere act of exploring it unlocks fresh perspectives that make your original choice sharper. This technique also fuels innovation. Many groundbreaking ideas in history came from those who did the reverse of conventional wisdom. While everyone else was building complex, feature-packed websites, Google built a blank page with one search bar. While everyone else was competing to sell more records, Spotify asked, what if we didn't sell records at all, but rented access to everything? There is a second, equally powerful form of inversion, famously used by investor Charlie Munger. Instead, used by investor Charlie Munger. Of asking, how do I succeed? Ask, how could I fail? By identifying all the things that would guarantee failure, e.g., take on massive debt, ignore my customers, never innovate. You can then simply focus on avoiding those things. This approach, inverting the problem, often reveals a clearer path to success. 29. The designed environment. How to make good habits effortless. Using environment cues to trigger action is about consciously designing the spaces around you so they silently push you toward the behaviors you want and away from the ones you don't. This technique is a core recognition of behavioral psychology. Willpower is fragile, but environment is constant. Most people try to use brute force discipline to fight their bad habits, a battle they will eventually lose when they are tired, stressed, or distracted. This method makes good choices almost automatic by making the right choice the path of least resistance. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine, and every object, sight and sound around you is a cue pulling you toward a specific behavior. A phone on your desk is a cue for distraction. A cluttered desk whispers procrastination. A bowl of fruit in plain sight is a cue for healthy eating. A book on your nightstand invites you to read. We respond to these triggers all day long, mostly unconsciously. The key is to stop being a passive victim of your environment and take control of them. You must become the architect of your surroundings. This is a game of friction. For good habits, you decrease friction. If you want to work out in the morning, lay out your clothes and shoes the night before. This removes friction. When you wake up, the cue for action is visible and easy. If you want to practice guitar daily, keep it on a stand in the middle of your living room, not locked in a case. The case and closet are friction. For bad habits, you increase friction. If you want to cut down on social media, remove the apps from your phone or keep your device in another room while you work. If you want to stop watching TV, unplug it and put the remote in a drawer. The small amount of effort it takes to plug it back in is often enough to make you reconsider. You are no longer fighting habits with raw discipline. You are making the right choice, the path of least resistance. Your environment is always shaping you, either by default or by design. 30. The efficiency hack. How task batching eliminates wasted time. Batching similar tasks is the mental hack that turns scattered energy into a concentrated force, allowing you to get more done in less time with less mental strain. At its core, batching means grouping tasks of the same nature. All your emails, phone calls, content creation, errands, and doing them in focus blocks instead of sprinkling them throughout your day. The reason this works so powerfully is because it defeats a hidden productivity killer, context switching. Our brains are not designed for multitasking, which is just rapid task switching. Every time you jump between different types of tasks, for example, from writing a deep analytical report, creative mode, to answering a quick, shallow email, reactive mode, and back again, your brain burns time and energy reorienting itself. This creates what scientists call attention residue, where a part of your mind is still thinking about the last task, preventing you from giving full focus to the new one. Studies show it can take over 20 minutes to fully regain deep focus after just one small interruption. When you batch, you eliminate that constant reset. You enter a single mental mode and you stay there until the block is done. For example, instead of checking email 30 times a day, you set 2 30-minute email blocks, one at 11:30 a.m. and one at 4 p.m. Outside of those blocks, your email is off. Answering 10 emails at once takes far less time than replying to them sporadically. Filming 5 videos in one sitting is exponentially faster than doing the setup, filming, and teardown 5 separate times. You can batch your entire week. Mondays for research, Tuesdays for writing, Wednesdays for meetings. This creates a rhythm your brain thrives on. Once you sink into a batch, your focus deepens, your speed increases, and your quality improves. The emotional payoff is just as important. It reduces decision fatigue and lowers stress because you are no longer juggling 100 nagging, open loops. You are crossing entire categories off your mental list, and that creates a profound sense of control. 31. The momentum engine. Crushing procrastination with the 2-minute rule. The 2-minute rule is a deceptively simple productivity weapon designed to eliminate procrastination by surgically removing your brain's favorite excuse. I'll do it later. The rule is straightforward. If a task will take less than 2 minutes to complete, you must do it immediately. This means no negotiating with yourself, no overthinking, and absolutely no putting it on a to-do list for the future. You just do it now. This works because of a hidden psychological burden. The mental cost of carrying an unfinished task is often far greater than the physical effort required to simply complete it. When you put off small, 2-minute actions, like sending a quick confirmation email, washing a single dish, or filing a document, they don't just disappear. They sit in the background of your mind, creating what productivity expert David Allen calls open loops. These open loops add invisible stress and clutter your mental workspace, consuming cognitive bandwidth just like a background program eats up a background program, eats up a computer's RAM. This low-level anxiety eats at your focus and energy, making the bigger, more important tasks feel even harder to tackle. By completing these micro-tasks instantly, you clear that mental backlog. Your brain feels lighter, sharper, and more in control, freeing up its full processing power for the work that matters. But that's only the first, simpler application of the rule. The second, more powerful use of the 2-minute rule is as a momentum trigger to overcome the resistance of large, intimidating projects. Often the hardest part of anything is just starting. The human brain is designed to conserve energy, so it creates a powerful wall of resistance, what physicists call activation energy, to any task that seems large or difficult. Telling yourself you'll work on something just for 2 minutes is a hack that bypasses this resistance. The goal write my book is paralyzing, but the goal write for 2 minutes is non-threatening, and your brain allows it. The magic is that once you start, you almost always keep going. This is Newton's first law applied to productivity. An object at rest stays at rest, but an object in motion stays in motion. The 2-minute rule is designed to hack that initial inertia. 2 minutes of tidying often becomes a full room cleanup. 2 minutes of reading a textbook becomes an entire chapter. 2 minutes of writing becomes a 45-minute flow state. High performers love this rule because it compounds. The magic isn't in the 2 minutes. It's in the way those 2 minutes dismantle the wall between intention and action, making movement your default state instead of hesitation. 32. The invisible price tag. Mastering the tragic math of opportunity cost. Thinking in terms of opportunity cost is the discipline of measuring every decision, not just by what it gives you, but by what it silently takes away. At its core, this powerful mental model forces you to acknowledge that saying yes to one thing is, by definition, saying no to something else. Whether that something else is your time, your money, your energy, or an entirely different path in life, it is gone forever. This technique is about learning to see the invisible price tag attached to every single choice you make, no matter how small. Most people evaluate decisions in isolation. They ask the simple, one-dimensional question, what will this give me? They fail to consider the equally important and far more profound question, what will I lose by choosing this? The truth that high performers live by is that time and our resources are finite. Time is the ultimate non-renewable resource. Every hour you spend on low-impact work, on scrolling, or on a mediocre opportunity is an hour you cannot invest in something truly life-changing. This mindset, when truly adopted, sharpens your decision-making like nothing else. Suddenly, everyday choices have weight. Scrolling on your phone for 30 minutes isn't just harmless downtime anymore. The cost isn't just the 30 minutes, it's the better thing you didn't choose. The opportunity cost of that 30 minutes is the 30 minutes you stole from building your dream, mastering a skill, or deepening a relationship. Let's do the math. 30 minutes of scrolling per day is 182.5 hours a year. That is 4.5 40-hour work weeks. The price of scrolling is not 30 minutes. It is the skill you could have mastered in a month. This concept scales up to life's biggest decisions, saying yes to a safe, mediocre opportunity, like a job you don't love, but that pays the bills, isn't a neutral choice. It means saying no to the high-risk, high-reward one that could have changed your life. The cost of that safe job is the business you never founded or the passion you never pursued. When you start seeing these hidden trade-offs, you stop living on autopilot. You become ruthless about where you put your time and focus, because you realize the real cost of a choice is not just the price you pay, it's the potential you sacrifice. 33. The compounding law of mastery, getting 38 better with the 1% rule. Applying the 1% daily improvement rule is the disciplined commitment to get just a tiny bit better every single day. This mindset is the antithesis of our culture's obsession with massive leaps, hacks, and overnight transformations. It is, instead, about the quiet, almost invisible progress that, when stacked consistently, builds into something unstoppable. The true power of this rule lies in the mathematics of compounding. A single 1% improvement today seems insignificant, almost laughable. You won't see the result tomorrow, or even the next week. But the math of this consistency is where the magic lies. As the text states, 1% compounded over a year doesn't make you 365% better. It makes you nearly 38 times better. This is the math of mastery. However, this law is neutral and works both ways. The dark side of this rule is just as true. 1% worse every day. One missed workout. One lazy decision. One extra soda compounds just as powerfully, leading to total decay. 0.99 to the 365th power is 0.9. You don't just stagnate, you decay to almost zero. Small, sustained gains create exponential growth, while small, sustained neglects create exponential decline. The real magic of the 1% rule, however, is psychological. It removes the intimidation of big goals. Most people burn out chasing perfection in short, heroic bursts. They try to go from the couch to a marathon, get injured and quit. They stare at the peak of the mountain and feel paralyzed by the distance. The 1% rule tells you to forget the peak and just focus on the next small step upward. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be slightly better than you were yesterday. This simple shift transforms improvement from an overwhelming, all-or-nothing challenge into a simple, achievable, daily habit. This principle applies to every area of life. Reading one more page each day deepens your knowledge. Saving one more dollar each day transforms your finances. In fitness, it's performing one more repetition. In writing, it's adding one more sentence. In a relationship, it's offering one single kind gesture per day, which compounds into deep, unshakable trust over years. Most people underestimate what they can achieve with patient consistency. This rule is a promise to yourself. No matter how small the action, you will end the day stronger, smarter, or more prepared than you started. 34. The paradox of choice. How to make faster decisions by eliminating options. Removing one option to make decisions faster is a counterintuitive mental hack that cuts through paralysis and forces clarity. Our modern culture operates on a false premise that more choices equal more freedom. But psychology proves the opposite. Too many options create decision fatigue, hesitation, and a paralyzing fear of regret. This is the paradox of choice, a term popularized by psychologist Barry Schwartz. When the mind is faced with endless possibilities, it begins to spiral through what-if scenarios, terrified of making the wrong choice, or more accurately, of missing out on the perfect choice. This overanalyzing leads to choice overload, which is a silent killer of momentum. The brain, in an attempt to find the optimal option, ends up choosing no option, and the moment for action slips away. The buffet analogy from the source is perfect. Think of a buffet with 50 dishes. You stand there overwhelmed, afraid to commit because you might miss out on something better. But if half the options were gone, you'd pick quickly and enjoy your meal without second-guessing. This is why high-end, confident restaurants often have very few, curated items on their menu. It's less stressful for the customer and signals mastery. The same principle applies to business decisions, creative projects, or even daily life. The actionable technique is to deliberately eliminate one or more options to reduce mental clutter. This forces your focus onto what's truly viable. Imagine you are trying to pick a new logo from 5 designs. The team is paralyzed. A strong leader will step in and say, "Logo C and E are eliminated. Let's not discuss them again." Suddenly, the debate between the remaining 3 becomes easier and more focused. You are removing distractions that dilute your energy. By crossing one path off the map, you give the others more mental real estate. You stop juggling endless maybes and start committing to action. The fog clears and what matters most stands out. When you're staring at a restaurant menu with 100 items, just decide I am not having chicken. This simple elimination cuts your choices by 25% and makes the final decision feel quicker, lighter, and carry more conviction. Sometimes the fastest way to choose isn't to add more pros and cons. It's to take one possibility off the table entirely. 35. The fear-setting exercise. How to conquer anxiety by visualizing failure. Visualizing the worst-case scenario is a powerful and counterintuitive mental strategy that strips fear of its power by dragging it out of the shadows and forcing it into the light. This is not pessimism. It is strategic preparation. Most anxiety doesn't come from a clear threat. It comes from the unknown. It's the vague, swirling what-ifs that haunt your mind without ever taking a clear form. Fear thrives on avoidance and ambiguity. The more you try not to think about something, the more power it gains over you. This technique, often called fear setting and rooted in Stoic philosophy, forces a direct confrontation. When you deliberately imagine the absolute worst thing that could happen in vivid detail, you remove its mystery. You see it, you name it, and you realize you can survive it. The process, as adapted by thinkers like Tim Ferriss, involves 3 critical steps. First, you define. You picture losing the deal, failing the presentation, or hearing no. Get specific. What is the absolute worst outcome? You get fired. You lose all your money. You are publicly humiliated. Don't just think it, write it down. See it play out. Feel the sting. Second, you prevent. You ask yourself, what could I do now to prevent this from happening? or at least lessen the impact? This simple question immediately shifts your brain from a state of passive fear to a state of active problem solving. Third, and most importantly, you repair. Then visualize your next move. You ask, if the worst happens, what would I do? Step by step, to recover, adapt, and rebuild. Who would I call? What's my day one plan? This process transforms the unknown terror into a challenge you've already mentally rehearsed. You stop treating it like an unspeakable threat. Often, you'll discover the worst case is far less catastrophic and far more manageable than your imagination made it. But even if it is truly bad, you now have a plan. This creates emotional armor. You stop living in fear of collapse because you've already stood in the rubble in your mind. Ironically, preparing for the worst frees you to pursue the best, because when you know you can survive failure, it no longer has the power to hold you back. 36. The Spark File. How to build a private vault for compounding creativity. Keeping a personal idea bank is like building a private vault where your sparks of inspiration can be stored, protected, and multiplied over time. At its core, this technique is about a simple, two-part process. First, capturing every thought, insight, or creative impulse the moment it appears, no matter how small, raw, or seemingly irrelevant, so it never gets lost to the noise of daily life. Ideas are fragile. They are fleeting neurological events. They fade quickly if not recorded, and once they're gone, they're almost impossible to recreate with the same intensity. The brain is a terrible storage unit. It's a fantastic processing unit, but a poor hard drive. Its job is to have ideas, not hold them. You might think you'll remember that $1,000,000 concept you had in the shower, but without a system, it dissolves within hours. An idea bank, sometimes called a spark file or a commonplace book, is that external system. This bank can be anything, as long as it's frictionless. Whether it's a digital note app, a journal, or a voice memo folder, it becomes your constant companion, ready to catch every flash of insight before it slips away. You capture everything. A throwaway line from months ago, a late night scribble, a fascinating quote, a link to an article, a photo of a design you like. But capturing is only half the battle. The real magic is in compounding creativity. This vault is not a museum. It's an incubator. You must schedule time to revisit it. When you revisit your bank, old ideas collide with new perspectives. An idea's value is not just the idea itself, but its connection to other ideas. You capture a quote on Monday. On Friday, you read an article. When you review your bank on Sunday, you see how the quote reframes the article, and a new idea is born. This compounding creativity is the goal. A late-night scribble might spark a business strategy years later. This practice also changes how you see the world. You become more observant, more curious, because you are now constantly looking for material to capture. Life becomes a hunt for inspiration, and your creativity no longer depends on fleeting bursts. 37. The Sunk Cost Trap. Why you must have the courage to quit. Avoiding the sunk cost fallacy is the critical ability to cut your losses and walk away from a failing path, no matter how much time, money, or energy you've already invested. It is one of the hardest mental skills to master because it means admitting that your past efforts no longer justify your present decisions. It forces you to stop throwing good resources after bad and start making choices based solely on future potential. This fallacy is fueled by ego and emotion. Our brain, are wired for loss aversion, and we mistakenly believe that quitting wastes our previous investment. We tell ourselves, I've already spent so much. I can't quit now. This flawed logic appears everywhere. You keep going in a doomed relationship because of the years together, even though you're both miserable. You cling to a business that's bleeding money because you've poured your savings into it, hoping one more loan will fix it. You suffer through a project you hate or a bad movie because you've already invested too many late nights. The truth is, those costs are gone forever. They can't be recovered no matter what you do next. That time, that money is sunk. The real danger is that this thinking chains you to a losing game. Every extra hour, dollar, or ounce of energy you give to something that's not working steals those resources from something that could work. This is the true cost. It is an opportunity cost problem. The time you spend trying to save a failing business is time you cannot spend building a new, successful one. The most successful people don't cling to the past. They pivot quickly when the return no longer justifies the effort. Avoiding this trap requires brutal honesty. You must ask yourself one question. If I weren't already invested, would I still choose this today? If you were offered this relationship, this project, or this investment today as a new opportunity, would you take it? If the answer is no, the path forward is clear. Freedom comes when you stop letting past sacrifices dictate your future and start making decisions for where you want to go, not for what you've already lost. 38. The Persuasion Code. How to win hearts and minds with storytelling. Speaking in stories is the ancient, primal skill that bypasses logic and connects directly to the emotional core of the human mind. The central maxim of persuasion is simple. Facts inform, but stories transform. We are wired to remember narratives far more deeply than we remember raw data. Long before written language existed, humans passed down knowledge, values, and critical survival strategies through storytelling. That ancient wiring still controls how we connect, trust, and ultimately decide. When you try to persuade with facts, data, and spreadsheets, you are speaking to the rational brain, the prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain is skeptical, slow, and energy-intensive. It argues. But when you speak in stories, you give your audience something they can see, hear, and feel. You take abstract ideas and wrap them in concrete characters, struggles, and resolutions that make them feel real. Instead of presenting a slide that says, "Persistence leads to success," you tell the story of an entrepreneur who failed 5 times before creating a billion-dollar company. Instead of explaining the dangers of a bad decision in dry terms, you share the gripping, personal account of someone who lived through it. Neuroscience reveals exactly why this works. When you listen to a data-heavy presentation, only the language centers of your brain light up. But when you listen to a compelling story, multiple parts of your brain are triggered simultaneously. Sensory, emotional, and cognitive, creating an immersive experience. Even more, researchers at Princeton found that stories activate a process called neural coupling. The listener's brain patterns begin to mirror the speaker's brain patterns. This builds a deep biological foundation of empathy and trust. Persuasion thrives on connection, and stories are connection machines. They act as a Trojan horse to lower defenses, sneak past skepticism, and plant ideas so deeply they feel like the listener's own. You cannot argue with a story. You can only experience it. In any field, the best persuaders are the best storytellers. Facts may prove your point, but stories make people care. And when they care, they act. 39. The power of the pause. How to master your emotions and control any situation. The act of pausing before reacting emotionally is the single greatest differentiator between being controlled by your emotions and using them as a tool. In the heat of the moment, when anger flares, fear spikes, or frustration boils over, your brain shifts into survival mode. This is the amygdala hijack. Your brain's emotional center, the amygdala, perceives a threat, whether it's a critical email or a physical danger, and floods your system with adrenaline. In that instant, logic shuts down. Your vision narrows, your heart races, and instinct takes over. This is a biological response designed to save you from a lion, but in the modern world, it's a disaster. This is the precise moment when words get spoken that can't be unsaid, when decisions get made that can't be undone, and when damage is done that can take years to repair. The pause is your lifeline. It is the mental circuit breaker that breaks the chain between the trigger and your default reaction. Even just a few seconds of intentional stillness is enough. It gives your rational mind, the prefrontal cortex, the crucial time it needs to catch up to the speeding emotional brain and re-engage. This pause can take many forms. It might be a slow, deep breath. A particularly powerful technique is the physiological sigh, researched by Dr. Andrew Huberman. A double inhale through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. This is the fastest known way to calm the nervous system. The pause could also be counting to 5, taking a sip of water, or even physically stepping back from the situation. That small gap gives you the power to ask the most important question. What outcome do I really want here? In that moment, your ego wants to win, but your rational self wants to solve. Instead of escalating a conflict, you can redirect it. Instead of firing off a regrettable email, you can craft a calculated response. The pause isn't weakness, it's restraint. And restraint in a world addicted to instant reactions is pure power. 40. The data mindset. How to reframe failure as your greatest teacher. Reframing failure as feedback is the mental alchemy that turns what most people fear into the very fuel that drives you forward. At its core, this technique is about stripping failure of its emotional sting and redefining it as nothing more than information. It is simply data for growth. When you learn to see failure not as proof of your inadequacy, but as a neutral data point, it stops being an enemy and becomes your greatest teacher. This is the core difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, terms coined by psychologist Carol Dweck. Most people interpret failure as a final verdict on their worth. This is the fixed mindset. They let it shame them, stall them, or convince them they're not capable. They believe their abilities are static, so a failure is a permanent, personal label. The growth mindset, however, understands that failure is not a person. It's an event. It is a mirror reflecting the gap between what you attempted and what actually happened. The emotion you attach to it is a choice, and if you choose to see it as feedback, it becomes an asset. Every misstep reveals hidden variables. It shows you a strategy that needs tweaking, a skill that needs sharpening, or a blind spot you couldn't see before. The lesson isn't in the success you hoped for. It's in the mistake that showed you how to get closer next time. This is the mindset of all great innovators. Some of the most iconic breakthroughs in history were born from repeated failures. Thomas Edison, when asked about his thousands of failed attempts at the light bulb, famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." He was treating every setback as a stepping stone. He wasn't failing. He was eliminating variables. The people who rise the fastest aren't the ones who avoid failure. They are the ones who mine it for wisdom with an almost ruthless curiosity. They ask, why did this happen? What can I learn? How can I adjust? They treat every setback as a stepping stone, not a stop sign, not a stop sign. Once you stop fearing failure, you stop holding back, and that is when your progress accelerates beyond anything you thought possible. 41. The Black Ledger. Journaling your target's demise. In the world of personal development, the decision journal is held up as the ultimate tool for self-awareness. It's a method championed by Stoics and industry titans alike, a way to conduct a brutally honest self-audit. You record your key decisions, your reasoning, your emotional state, and your expectations. Months later, you review the outcome and see the flaws in your own thinking. You find your biases. You see the patterns it reveals, and you stop repeating costly mistakes. This is a path to wisdom. But in the hands of a dark psychologist, this entire concept is inverted. They don't keep a journal to audit themselves. They keep a journal to audit you. This isn't a decision journal. It's a black ledger. It's an opposition research file, meticulously detailing your every weakness, contradiction, and vulnerability. The manipulator's practice is not about recording their key decisions. It's about recording yours. They are the silent historian of your flaws. When you are vulnerable, you might think you are confessing. In reality, you are giving an interview. They log your reasoning. She said she's terrified of being alone. They log your emotional state. He gets overly optimistic and agrees to anything after receiving public praise. They log your expectations. She expects to be promoted by Q3 and will sacrifice her weekends to get it. They capture these details your memory will later distort, but they aren't for your record. They are for theirs. The true power of this habit lies in the patterns it reveals to them. A narcissistic partner remembers exactly what you said and felt during a fight 3 months ago. This isn't a feat of memory. It's a feat of logging. In a future argument, they won't just argue. They will revisit their ledger. You say I'm controlling? That's interesting, because on May 15th, you admitted you were too emotional to make good decisions. I'm not controlling. I'm just stepping in, like you asked me to. A sociopathic manager does this in the workplace. They don't just manage. They profile. They keep a work diary that's less about projects and more about people. They note that employee A crumbles under public pressure and employee B will do anything for a simple thank you. They use this data to pit people against each other, assign blame strategically, and secure their own position. They are refining their judgment, not of themselves, but of how to manipulate their staff. This journal turns every choice you make into a learning investment for them. They make decisions wiser because they are guided not by their own ego, but by an evolving, sharpening map of your mind's blind spots. 42. The War Room. Engineering chaos to deny your clarity. Scheduling thinking time is the deliberate act of stepping away from the noise of doing. In a world that glorifies constant action, the simple act of being unavailable, of putting a block in your calendar labeled thinking, is a radical act of self-preservation. This is where real strategy happens. This is the time to process, imagine, and evaluate, to see the hidden solutions to stubborn problems. It's how leaders chart paths that feel obvious in hindsight. This breathing room is where clarity is born, and clarity is the antidote to manipulation. For this exact reason, a dark psychologist will never allow you to have it. The manipulator understands this principle better than anyone, but they apply it in duality. First, they fiercely protect their own thinking time. Their scheduled time is a war room. It is where they step away from the noise of their own charade to dispassionately analyze their next move. It is where they decide how to unravel your reality, how to connect the dots of your weaknesses, and how to refine their tactics. Their breakthroughs are your breakdowns. Second, and more importantly, they engineer your life to be devoid of this necessity. They will fill your days with manufactured chaos to ensure you can never stop to think about whether you're moving in the right direction. They know that if you ever found a single hour of focused thinking, you would see the exit. So, they deny it. The micromanaging boss is a perfect example. They fiercely protect their own quiet mornings to strategize, but they schedule your days with back-to-back pointless meetings and a constant barrage of urgent emails. You're so busy doing that you never have time to decide that this job is toxic. In a domestic setting, it's the partner who cannot stand to see you sitting quietly with a book or a journal. The moment you sit down to recharge, they suddenly have an urgent crisis, a chore that must be done now, or an emotional drama that demands your full, undivided mental energy. They keep you in a state of perpetual reaction, unable to evaluate your own life. They ensure your urgent tasks scream so loudly, your own important ideas are suffocated. This is motion without progress. They keep you running faster, not so you'll arrive, but so you'll be too out of breath to question the race. 43. Algorithmic Control. Programming your target's responses. Using if-then planning is a famously effective psychological tool for achieving goals. It's like installing mental autopilot. The premise is simple. You pre-decide your actions by linking a specific situation, the if, to a predetermined action, the then. For example, if it's 7:00 a.m. on weekdays, then I put on my running shoes. This strategy removes the hesitation gap and bypasses that chaos of in-the-moment decision-making. It turns your willpower into a script and makes your desired action the path of least resistance. A dark psychologist looks at this powerful technique and sees its true potential. Not for programming oneself, but for programming others. They are not interested in installing autopilot for their goals. They are interested in installing it in you, with them in the cockpit. This technique is about programming you. They turn your willpower into a script they can follow. The F becomes the trigger they pull, and the then becomes your automatic chain reaction that serves their needs. They are building a clear mental script for you to win their game. This method is especially powerful under pressure. Pressure they are more than happy to create. A toxic parent programs a child. If you get anything less than an A, then you are a disappointment. The child's brain, loving patterns, follows the script. They bypass the chaos of what do I want to study and replace it with the ready-made response of I must get an A to survive. In a relationship, it starts simply, if I call you, then you must answer. This seems reasonable until the script is updated. If I call you and you are in the shower, then you are choosing the shower over me. The vague intentions are gone. The trigger is now harder, it is to ignore. The if-then plan becomes a tool of coercive control. If you really loved me, then you would stop talking to your family. If I'm at a professional event, a healthy person plans, then I will introduce myself to 3 people. The manipulator's script reads, if you are at a professional event, then you will text me every 15 minutes. This bypasses that chaos, replacing your professional judgment with their reflex. It's not magic. It's preparation disguised as inevitability. The target is far more likely to achieve their goals, except the goals are not their own. 44. Coercive compounding. Stacking the chains of control. Habit stacking is a celebrated strategy for exponential growth. The concept is simple. You link a new desired behavior to one you already do automatically, creating a chain of actions. As the original source states, you bypass the friction of willpower by riding the momentum of something you're already doing. You brush your teeth every morning, so you stack doing 10 push-ups immediately after. You make coffee, so you stack writing 3 sentences in a journal. Over time, these actions fuse into one seamless ritual and growth becomes automatic. This compounding effect is powerful, but this very mechanism, in the hands of a manipulator, becomes a blueprint for escalating coercive control. For them, it's not habit stacking, it's coercive compounding. The manipulator anchors their new demand to one of your existing habits, bypassing the friction of your resistance. The beauty for them lies in how small this can start. It's never a big demand first. Let's trace the escalation. Your existing automatic habit is making coffee. The manipulator's first stack is simple. When you make your coffee, can you bring me a cup? It's a natural extension of what you already do. A week later, they add to the stack. When you bring me my coffee, can you sit with me for a few minutes while I wake up? This also seems reasonable. A month later, the stack is complete. When you bring me my coffee, I need you to sit with me so I can check your phone from last night. The exponential growth is now clear. The 1 push-up of a simple favor has become the 20 push-ups of a full-blown morning interrogation. The original 3 sentences of a simple check-in have become pages of justifications for your existence. Over days and weeks, these actions stop feeling separate. Your brain starts to see the trigger and automatically execute the whole chain without thinking. This piggyback method is diabolical because it uses your own consistency against you. There's no mental negotiation, no daily decision fatigue. The manipulator has eliminated that weakness of your resistance. You don't need to get inspired to change. You just attach the change to something you already do. And once linked, their control becomes automatic, unstoppable, and compounding. 45. The ticking clock. Manufacturing panic to force submission. Using deadlines as creative constraints is a high-performance technique. The idea is that time pressure can be a weapon for focus, sparking unexpected creativity. When time is unlimited, The mind wanders and perfectionism creeps in. But a well-set deadline creates urgency, silences overthinking, and cuts away the luxury of hesitation. You commit to one path because the clock is ticking. This pressure can free creativity, forcing you to bypass the inner critic and tap into raw, instinctive problem-solving. This is how a creative mind turns a threat into a catalyst. A manipulative individual wields this same pressure cooker, not against themselves for focus, but against you for compliance. Most people see deadlines as stress-inducing ultimatums, and the manipulator ensures this is exactly how you experience them. They intentionally trigger this stress to silence your overthinking, force your decisive action, and spark your panic, not your creativity. At its core, this method relies on a truth about human behavior. We rarely act at full capacity without a boundary to push against. The manipulator provides that boundary, but it's a closing wall. This is the exploding offer tactic used by high-pressure salespeople and cult recruiters. This offer is only good for the next hour. This isn't to spark unexpected creativity. It's to prevent rational thought. It cuts away the luxury of hesitation, the hesitation that would allow you to do your research, talk to a friend, and see the scam. In a relationship, it's the partner who issues an ultimatum. You have until tomorrow to decide if you're moving in with me, or we're done. This absurdly short deadline isn't designed to create a solution. It's designed to force decisive action in their favor. It bypasses the inner critic, the critic that is screaming, "This is too fast. This is a bad idea." The original text says the sweet spot forces focus without sacrificing quality. The manipulator's sweet spot forces focus by sacrificing your quality of life. Too short and you panic into sloppy work, or in this case, a sloppy, desperate yes. They are not wielding deadlines as creative boundaries. They are wielding them as threats. You stop fearing the clock and start fearing the consequences they've attached to it. 46. The disruption ritual. How isolation sparks dependence. The idea that breaking patterns can spark new ideas is a well-known creativity hack. The human mind is wired for efficiency and loves routines, which is terrible for creativity. To interrupt the autopilot, you can do something simple like taking a different route to work, working in a new environment, or brainstorming with people outside your usual circle. This jolt forces your brain to process information differently, activating creative problem-solving regions and allowing new neural connections to form. This novelty is where sparks happen. A manipulator seizes this exact concept and applies it to you. They don't break their patterns, they break yours. And their goal isn't to spark your ideas. It is to shatter your reality and spark your dependence. The human mind loves routines because routines create stability and safety. A manipulator knows that your autopilot is their enemy. They must interrupt it to seize the controls. When they deliberately break your patterns, they jolt your brain out of its default mode. But this isn't a spark, it's a short circuit. This is a core tactic of isolation. Taking a different route to work becomes them forcing you to move to a new city, cutting you off from your support system. Brainstorming with people outside your usual circle becomes them systematically introducing their friends, flying monkeys, while slandering and eliminating yours. Flipping your daily schedule becomes the chaotic and unpredictable cycle of love bombing and devaluation. Your autopilot is shattered. You can no longer predict what will make them happy or angry. This is not novelty that lights up the brain's reward system. This is instability that lights up the brain's threat system. The creative problem-solving that gets activated is entirely focused on one thing. How do I survive this? How do I get back to the good part? The manipulator engineers these breaks on purpose. They know comfort breeds repetition, and your comfort is their enemy. They invite the unexpected because in those strange, slightly uncomfortable moments of chaos, the only idea that suddenly comes alive is that they are the only stable thing left to cling to. They break your world so they can be the only one to put it back together. 47. Inversion Warfare. Weaponizing your virtues. Practicing opposite thinking is a mental jolt designed to break you free from stale patterns. It's a powerful creativity tool. At its core, this technique means deliberately flipping your default assumptions and asking, what if I did the exact opposite of what I would normally do? We are creatures of habit, and this disrupts that loop. If your instinct is to play it safe, you ask, what if I took the boldest risk instead? If your default is to avoid conflict, you ask, what if I addressed it directly? This method exposes blind spots and fuels innovation. Many groundbreaking ideas came from those who did the reverse of conventional wisdom. But in the hands of a dark psychologist, this is not a tool for innovation. It's a tool for warfare. It is used to break you. This technique means deliberately flipping your default assumptions. They ask, what if I did the exact opposite of what you would normally expect? It's a way to shatter your mental ruts. A manipulator knows that your safe, familiar, and efficient thought patterns make you predictable. Your default assumption is that people are generally good. Your instinct is to be kind. Your default is to apologize when you hurt someone. The manipulator's opposite thinking disrupts your loop by forcing them into unfamiliar territory where their creativity and insight thrive. If your instinct is to be kind, they ask, what if I took the boldest risk and accused her of being cruel? If your default is to avoid conflict, they ask, what if I addressed it directly, but blamed her for it? I blamed her for it. This is the core of Darvo. Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. A target's default assumption is to apologize when confronted. The manipulator, when confronted, does the exact opposite. Your instinct is to play it safe. Your instinct is to play it safe. Theirs is to take the boldest risk, the risk of telling an outrageous lie with a straight face. This method exposes blind spots, your blind spots. Your assumption that people operate with a basic level of decency is your blind spot, and they exploit it. This fuels innovation, the innovation of abuse. They are challenging what everyone else assumed was fixed truth, the fixed truth of your character, your memory, and your sanity. 48. The scent of control. Engineering a prison of cues. Using environment cues to trigger action is a powerful self-improvement hack. It's about designing the spaces around you so they silently push you toward the behaviors you want. The principle is that willpower is fragile, but environment is constant. If you shape your surroundings strategically, you can make good choices almost automatic. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine, and every object, sight, and sound is a cue. A book on your nightstand invites you to read. A bowl of fruit in plain sight nudges you toward healthier eating. If you want to work out in the morning, lay out your clothes. You are making the right choice. The path of least resistance. A manipulator simply co-opts this principle. They design your space to silently push you toward the behaviors they want. They recognize that your willpower is fragile, and if they shape your surroundings strategically, they can make their choices for you almost automatic. They take control of your cues. This control can be positive during the love-bombing phase. They fill your space with their photos, gifts, and reminders. The cue is I am loved. I am safe. This primes your brain for compliance. But in the devaluation phase, the cues turn negative. The book on your nightstand is replaced with a helpful diet book, a cue that you're not attractive enough. The bowl of fruit is replaced with their empty beer bottles, a cue that they're in charge, and you are their servant. If you want to work out in the morning, you lay out your clothes. If they want to stop you, they helpfully put those clothes in the laundry. This is a classic form of gaslighting. They move your keys. You know you put them on the hook. That's your cue. They move them. Your cue is broken. Your reality is broken. You are no longer fighting habits with raw discipline. You are fighting an environment that has been weaponized against you. You want to cut down on social media, so you keep your phone in another room. They help by demanding you keep your phone on you at all times in case I need you. Your environment is always shaping you, either by default or by design. They have simply taken over the design. 49. The Chaos Engine. Using context switching to burn out your target. Batching similar tasks is the mental hack that turns scattered energy into a concentrated force. It allows you to get more done in less time with less mental strain. At its core, it means grouping tasks of the same nature and doing them in focus blocks. The reason this is so powerfully effective is because it eliminates the hidden productivity killer. Context switching. Every time you jump between different types of tasks, your brain burns time and energy reorienting itself, leaving you slower, less focused, and more prone to mistakes. Answering 10 emails at once takes far less time than replying to them sporadically. This technique creates a rhythm your brain thrives on and reduces decision fatigue. A manipulator understands this principle perfectly. They know that this concentrated force is a threat to their control, and that is precisely why they will never ever let you do it. A dark psychologist weaponizes context switching. They use it as an interrogation tool. They force you to jump. Just as you sit down to batch your work emails, which is a logical analytical mode, they will interrupt to start an emotional conversation about your relationship. This is context switch 1. As you reorient to that emotional mode, they will suddenly demand you do a logistical task, like an errand. Go get me a drink. This is context switch 2. Then, as you are heading out the door, they will ask you a complex logical question about your finances. Did you pay the electric bill? Go check right now. This is context switch 3. Finally, as you return, frustrated, they hit you with switch 4. And why did you look at me like that? Do you think I'm stupid? You have been forced to switch from logical to emotional to logistical to defensive, all in the span of 5 minutes. Your brain burns time and energy with each switch. You are left slower, less focused, and more prone to mistakes. This technique creates a rhythm your brain hates. You are constantly juggling 100 little things, which maximizes your decision fatigue. In a distracted world, the manipulator is the distraction. They reclaim their attention by scattering yours. They reclaim their sense of control by making you lose yours. 50. Death by 1,000 cuts. The 2-minute subjugation. The 2-minute rule is a deceptively simple productivity weapon designed to eliminate procrastination. The rule is straightforward. If a task will take less than 2 minutes, do it immediately. There's no negotiating, no overthinking. This works because the mental cost of carrying an unfinished task is often greater than the effort to simply complete it. When you put off small actions like sending a quick email or washing a dish, they sit in the background of your mind, adding invisible stress. By completing microtasks instantly, you clear that mental backlog and your brain feels lighter, sharper, and more in control. It's also a momentum trigger. Starting is the hardest part, and 2 minutes of tidying can become a full room cleanup. A manipulator, however, uses this rule to inflict procrastination on everything else in your life. They use it to create a death by 1,000 cuts. For the manipulator, this is not a rule for themselves, but a command they issue to you. They bombard you with an endless stream of microtasks that individually seem too small to refuse. Just wash this dish. Just send this quick email for me. Just fetch me a drink. Just file this document. Just give me a back rub. No negotiating. Just do it now. This works because the mental cost of arguing about the 2-minute task is greater than the effort to simply complete it. But when they force their small actions on you, it adds visible stress and clutters your entire day. You are not clearing your mental backlog. You are becoming their mental backlog. This is a momentum trigger, but not for your goals. It's a momentum trigger for their control. 2 minutes of tidying becomes a full room cleanup for them. 2 minutes of writing becomes a productive session. You writing an email they dictated. High performers love this rule because it compounds. Manipulators love it for the same reason. Dozens of small actions done instantly each day create a tidal wave of progress. For them, the victim's entire day is consumed by these microtasks. By the time they have a moment to themselves, their mental backlog is full, and their energy is gone, making them unable to tackle the bigger tasks, like planning their escape.